Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello and welcome back to Wallula's weekly podcast. My name is Zach Boland, student pastor here at Wallula Christian Church, joined by Craig Archer, worship pastor, Lance Kaufman, senior pastor. That was pretty fast. I'm getting pretty good at this.
Pretty fast.
I know. I'm excited. We finished Easter last weekend, and we'll be talking about that sermon today. We had quite a few people come, so maybe we'll get some new listeners today. If you're watching for the first time, wondering what this podcast is about, it's amazing, and we're glad you're here.
Self-proclaimed.
It is, as said by me. But like always, we're going to start with a fun question before we jump into the group questions. And it is, what's your favorite subject in school, or what was your favorite subject in school? I guess, Lance, I could say is right now for you. Maybe there's a subject in your master's class that's really taking the lead.
Maybe so.
Maybe.
We're about to find out.
I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Craig, what did you have?
Mine would be band or
Yep.
jazz band.
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was thinking about this, and it was an hour in my day where I just got to go play the drum set.
Sure.
And how great is that?
I mean, for you,
for
I
me,
guess that sounds
good,
I
yeah.
guess that's you.
That was
You'll have to
amazing.
tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was all I wanted to do when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I would just go home and play drums for hours.
Mm.
And so doing that at school in the middle of the day,
Right.
it's
What a deal.
fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was just, it was like my peak interest, hobby, and everything. And
Yeah.
just got to do it. And I had
Yeah.
friends in there. It was like a smaller group of people. It was like, 25 people. So, we did like extra
In a
trips.
jazz band?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Like extra trips and performances.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it was a fun group and just really enjoyed it. So,
Yeah.
So did you have 2 hours of band?
I
you
did.
Have jazz band and
yeah.
band?
Senior year was really great because I had band first hour.
Yeah.
And then I think jazz band was right after it. So like the first 2 hours of the day.
Yeah.
And then towards the end of the day, I took music theory. And so I had 3 hours of just music stuff.
Right.
It was
yeah.
awesome.
Nope.
Yeah. My senior year, the first semester, I had in the first hour physics.
Oh, man.
And that didn't go.
Whenever I
Good
was
way
in
to
band,
start your day.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
whenever I was in band
So-
first hour, I thought about having to go to an actual class first hour.
Right.
Which I
Yeah.
never
Like
experienced.
a normal. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. We did band first hour too.
Because marching band.
Yeah.
And I
Got
just
your
thought,
shoes wet
that
in the
doesn't
morning.
sound very nice. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I avoided it for 4 years.
Like a
so
real person.
yeah.
So I dropped physics second semester. I'm like, I did the ultimate senior in high school thing and quit. I just dropped it.
You're like,
And
I've already graduated. What am I doing?
And had to have a class
Yeah.
for, and so I took world geography, and that was the one that was available and whatever. And the thing I remember about world geography is that I don't want to disparage others, all right? But I was in that class with people who also were looking for
So is it like smarter people who just didn't want to try anymore,
No.
and they're like, all right, we're done.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. No, it was folks who had signed up long ago.
Oh, they had
on that
pre-planned this
path.
one. Gotcha.
Yes. Yes. And so they were, and I remember second semester of my senior year, I strolled into that class at kind of all points, hours, just late every day. And I really believe the teacher, he never hassled me about it or
Yeah.
anything. I think he was just glad that there was another human being in the room
Yeah.
who could articulate a full sentence sort
Yeah.
of thing. And he was just good. I couldn't really do physics, but I could communicate well enough with this guy that he was just sort of good with having somebody else to hang out with.
You think about like being a teacher in high school and just the difference of, and
sometimes it'd be rough.
if
yeah.
like a freshman teacher is talking to
Yeah.
a senior, and
Right.
they're like, man, they're just nervous all the time. And it's like, what? Like
Yeah.
if you're someone who's
Yeah.
teaching seniors, they're just
Right.
like, just glad you're here, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's truly like anything else. I mean, some folks really, really want to be there, and some folks not so much.
Yep.
You know, and
especially seniors.
yeah,
As a rule, they're
right. Yeah.
they have a lot going on. So I had two things. One is the fun one was I was in a PE class every year, and so the mandatory one, and then after that they had one that was rec sports, so we got to play all sorts of things.
Sure.
I'm really good at ping pong, and we had a ping pong championship, and I won it, and so that was fun. And then after that, I did a weightlifting because I was like, I'm not playing any sports. I didn't play anything. I was in band, so I was like, if I don't do something. So for the last 2 years, I was with Coach Hodem, and we did running or weightlifting every day just to do something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of enjoyed that and kept me in shape. But the one that actually, the real class, not the band or PE one, that I actually enjoyed.
Shots fired.
I know.
No, yeah.
I took.
We love all our music
Yes,
instructors
that's right.
in physical education.
I took food skills and bake shop
Teachers.
and gourmet cooking, and I don't count any of those.
Just throwing everyone under the bus.
I know. I'm just saying. But it kind of reminds me of you. I went in my senior year and I was like, I don't want to take any more hard classes, you know. And so we had the class that I was going to go for was called exploratory reading, and it's just reading a book that you want, and then like every 2 weeks you write like half a page on it. And I was like, that sounds wonderful. So I go in and I'm like, hey, I'd like to take exploratory reading, and my counselor's like. Because I'd been in AP English classes and stuff, and they're like, why don't you try senior lit and comp? And I was like, and in my mind, I didn't want to say, because I don't want to write this 10-page paper that's due at the, and I knew it was coming, but I was too much of a coward to say, because I don't want to do hard work anymore. And so I was like, well, I mean, I just kind of whatever. And she's like, I think you would get a lot out of it. And I didn't have the courage to say no. So I took it. And it was the hardest class I'd taken, but the teacher was really good, Miss Scott. And so I got a lot out of it, learned a lot. And actually, having done that, it gave me confidence to be like, oh, I can do this. You know, whereas before it seemed like this thing that was really intimidating. And so I enjoyed that surprisingly a lot. And so, Miss Scott, senior lit and Lang took 2 semesters. And so it was good. And then I actually ended up using that in college a lot because I do a lot of writing. So that helped.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was going to say, as you're throwing all of these classes under the bus.
I mean, I loved Miss Kellum. It was great. All
not real classes,
it's not that. I'm just saying, like.
I just wanted to remind you that we graduated from Bible college.
I know. Well, hey, it was hard.
Some folks would characterize as not real college.
The math was pretty easy. Considering there was none. But the other classes were.
Right.
They kicked my booty.
Yes.
Yeah. But yes, no, I get it. All right. Well,
one of my kids, and I won't mention any names, Clayton, but his worst grades in college were in Bible classes.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I would.
You were furious.
Not waste an opportunity. I would not waste an opportunity to remind him of all the times he was like, "Well, you just went to Bible college, Dad." Of course, you know. Yeah.
Is it because he just thought he felt more comfortable with those classes that he didn't want to try as much? Because he grew up he grew up with this.
Right.
So
I don't know.
I'm sure he had a little bit of advantage starting off.
I don't know. I think he's much more of a kind of a math kind of analytical thinker, and so maybe my guess is that like he probably just didn't do stuff on time. Probably is the real hard thing there.
Well, okay, we'll move on to this, but I do have one quick question because I was talking to some students about this. When you're taking a test, would you rather it be multiple choice or essay? Would you rather be like either I know it or I don't, or I can kind of write my way out of, kind of embellish a little bit?
At this point, I would maybe say essay.
Okay. I guess it depends on what the test is.
Yeah, that's true too.
If it's on physics.
Yeah. Nope.
Please give me an answer.
Give me an option here.
At least I have a 25% chance.
Well, Zoe is an English major, you know, and she's going to teach English in high school or middle school or whatever she wants to do. Middle school. And she said the other day that she turned in some assignment, a quiz on a book a subject, an article, or whatever, that's how English classes go, right? We're gonna have a quiz. Here's 2 questions. Answer these questions over these
Mine was multiple
chapters,
choice. Oh.
right? And so maybe it was just a couple chapters or whatever, but she hadn't read it,
Oh, okay.
and she turned in the quiz and got an A, and sent a text about how her teacher had said, "Oh, this is really great insight into the thing that she hadn't read," which just sort of, come on, what's going on? Which always makes I'm cynical, and so if that would have happened to me, I'd be like, did she read this?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah.
Who's great? Is she really great in this?
Yeah.
Or he? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is the professor really grading this?
Yeah.
But anyway, so maybe evidently for Zoe, it's essay.
Yeah, that drove me crazy because with essays, I would read it and know the answer and still struggle with how do I, trying to word it the right way. And some people could just, like magic, just be like, I'll just write some stuff.
Yeah.
And
I bet on, we'll move on 80% of the papers I turned in and Bible college.
Sure.
I would get a comment like, Bible college is, I just hear it from folks once in a while, but, I'm proud of my education.
I found it challenging.
There is, yeah.
I mean, it was not easy for some of them.
No. Anyway, I would often receive a comment on these papers like, this is okay, but your introduction was way too long, right? Because, you have 5-10-page paper and... Well, I'm going to tell this story.
You got to pad this a little bit. Yeah.
I'm just going to tell this.
I'm going to be a pastor, so let me.
I'll just write this.
I'm working on how to
story at the beginning of the paper.
That's how it's supposed to start. I learned it by watching you.
How else am I supposed to get you engaged?
That's right.
That's right.
This is the hook.
Read this
I was
whole
just
thing.
thinking of you.
That's right. All right. I was thinking of other things, but we're going to move on.
Yeah. Quickly before
we think of something.
Yeah, I have other stories. I'll tell you later.
We are looking at
other ways I've slacked off in life. I'm now proud of.
Yes.
So let me tell you.
I can brag on it now.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking at the sermon from this past Sunday of Easter Sunday, titled "The Ultimate Show and Tell." Sometimes I forget the titles because I'm taking notes and stuff, but I forget to look at what that is. I'm like, oh yeah. And we are looking at the empty tomb of Mary and Mary being the first to see that, and the angel telling them to go and tell. And so we're going to be looking at question number 6. And as we look at the 2 women, it says that the Bible says that they left the tomb and they ran with a mixture of fear and joy. And what does this image mean to you? So we have these kind of competing ideas or emotions that you don't see together a lot, fear and joy. And so, just more of an open-ended thing. What does that mean to you? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is a odd mixture, both of those, because I don't know if they're exactly opposites, but you could kind of put them in different categories. But I was thinking about how they aren't new reactions or emotions or feelings when you look throughout the Bible. So some of the examples I thought of, Job is described as fearing God. Proverbs 1, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. In Jeremiah 32, fearing God is equated with goodness or turning to God. And then other things I thought of isn't necessarily like explicitly says like fear or fearful, but you think of like anytime an angel shows up, it seems like they're always like, don't be afraid. Like Mary or the shepherds in the Christmas story. So whatever the reaction was, they're like, don't worry,
Right.
And
I even think like, it doesn't say it explicitly, but like Moses in the burning bush, just like getting down and like, it's like a humbling sort of reverence. I remember we talked about that one time in an episode, like what fearing the Lord looks like. And those are the kind of the words we talked about, reverence or awe, reacting to God's holiness and righteousness. But then on the other end of it, you have joy, and Nehemiah, a verse came to mind, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And so you get both of those things when you interact with the Lord, fear and joy. And I think in this instance, this event specifically, like they have the fear because of the angel and the appearance. Like I said, anytime angel shows up, it's kind of this thought of like, don't be fearful, messenger of the Lord sort of thing. But then the joy comes from like the good news. The tomb is empty. And so you have on one hand this reaction to the I don't know, even like the strangeness of the event and how shocking it is. But then at the same time, this good news that what they were expecting is not what they got. And so they walked away. They had to tell people Jesus is alive, that what he said came true. And man, that would fill them with lots of joy, like it does us today. So like anytime we hear the good news or we're reminded of it, I think we get that sense of joy that they experience too. And we'll talk about it a little more, but when you get both of those things, fear and joy, like it gives you, I think, fuel for telling people, or like that's kind of a response that comes with it, is like you can't help but talk about it. And and then going back to Acts, I was reading where we're headed in Acts 3 and 4, and it's just like they couldn't help it. Like go to jail, doesn't matter. We're gonna get out and we're gonna keep talking about the resurrection. So I think we see that happening over and over in Acts. But
I was trying to come up with like, do I have any real life examples of a time when I was afraid or fearful and joyful at the same time? And I can't. I set that up like I was going to say something, but I don't. But yeah.
What about when you preach?
There's joy when it's over. No, well, when it's done, I'm like, okay, that was good. But yeah, there's kind of a mixture of both. Like I guess that's true. Yeah, there's an excitement of like especially when you're ready to get up there, and that's true.
People will ask often still, do you get nervous? Do you still get nervous when you speak in front of people or when you preach? And my answer is always kind of convoluted because I'm not nervous about the public speaking. I'm not nervous about that activity or that event or whatever. I don't think in the same way that people might get nervous about a presentation in front of someone. But man, there is this task that I feel like, I'm called to do, right? You're called to do this. God says, okay, this is what I want you to be about. And so there's great joy when you're fulfilling that, when you're doing that, in the whole process. But there's also a part of me that is, and maybe it's because, I'm used to doing this, but the fear, I guess, is I don't want the complacency or the being comfortable with the activity, because it's not really complacency, but being comfortable in that environment, to, just like when I first started, I would be nervous and worried and anxious and concerned. I don't want to mess this up. Right. I don't want to take God's word and, be disrespectful to it or teach something that's not true. Right. I don't want to be a heretic.
Right. Yeah.
And but that's still true. Right. And not that I'm with experience you can gain confidence in that even, but you still, man, this is such a big task. You don't want to mess that up.
Right.
You don't want to you don't want to be the person who somebody says, well, I wanted to give church a try, or I wanted to give God's word, God a try, but that guy, that was terrible. What he said about this, I just can't reconcile. You
Right.
don't want to be that guy, so you don't want to mess it up. To me, sorry, Zach, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
No, that's really good,
fear and joy.
and it's and I guess that kind of illustrates the difference of fear, because there's different, I guess, types of fear,
Right,
And
yeah.
so like when it comes to this of the fear of like Jesus came back to life, or not just Jesus, but like fear of the dead coming to life. Wow, there's great power. Like we're experiencing something that no one has ever
Right,
seen before, and so the fear of like being in awe almost,
Right.
which is to me was different than like the anxiousness of
Yeah.
going to speak. But and then this is the sort of the surface level answer, and joy because the person who came back to life is Jesus, and so they have these two things. But I had also had, especially the fear aspect, looking at Proverbs 1, like you said, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and you see the fear of the Lord over and over again. And I had heard someone say sort of the illustration of when my kids were younger, I can't do it now, but you could throw them up really high. I mean, like really high, like
Sure.
scaring people high, and you're like, whoa, I could, and they weigh nothing. Now I can't do any of that. My kids are too old, but there's a strength there, right? There's like, wow, my dad can do whatever, but it's that same strength that could throw them really far. And I wasn't even doing as hard as I could. But that same strength is also the strength that comforts too. And so there's this idea of like, I'm in the presence of something that's so strong and big and more powerful than I can even imagine. And so not the fear of being afraid of it, but just recognizing, wow, it's almost like an awe of that kind of thing. Like, wow, I didn't think this was even possible. And now there's so much more possible that I don't even realize. Mark Moore had said in one of his books, he goes, what should we do when we fear someone? In that kind of capacity. And he said, we should obey them. And he goes, if you both fear and love someone, then honoring that person in obedience is your instinctive response. And so it's not that we're afraid of God. We're not scared to be in his presence, but understanding and seeing his power, it does create an awe in us. And so, especially when it's coming back to life. And so
I saw a quote that said like the fear of God is like the soil for sanctification or holiness or something like that.
Yeah.
And that it's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Leads to obedience and following.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I think of, we're starting to read the Chronicles of Narnia. Selah hasn't read it, so we're going to start that one. But I remember one quote, it's talking about Aslan the lion, and it's like, well, is he safe? And they're like, no, he's not safe.
Right.
But he's good. And so realizing, it's a lion. They can still, do damage. And so, but yeah, I think when we have the proper fear of God, I think not having the fear of God takes you to a place of like, it doesn't matter. It's all fine. Like we're very trivial and passive with things. And it's like, who do you think you're dealing with here? Like it's the creator of the universe. And you're just like, it's not that big a deal. I'm like, oh, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so having fear kind of puts us, we know where we are in our place with God, and we have a proper humility and respect because of who he is and the power that he has. But yeah, so I think both those things, it's a really cool combination that you don't really see many places like that. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I think you guys are right on it. As far as, when I thought about it, I thought about kind of what Craig, you mentioned, maybe fear is kind of like the opposite of joy or what have you. And if one's on one end of a continuum and the other's on the other end, you'll hear people say things like, don't allow fear to steal your joy, right? And I just I hear that, I understand that, I guess, but I wrote down, a little fear is a good thing, and like you guys have been saying here, it's just that God is really big. You see in this passage how powerful he is, right? There's an earthquake, right? He literally shakes the earth.
Right.
God is really big, and God is really holy. He's set apart. He's so set apart that, like, when he wants to send a message, he sends a messenger, right? There's this go-between kind of idea, and I think not that God isn't personal, but that man, he's holy, and that's what that reminded me of. And then part of how big God is that God is a God of judgment, and you get these guards who look like they're dead. You know, they're so shook by this event, so afraid that they faint, they fall down like they're dead. And it just reminded me that God is a God of judgment, and we ought to be, we ought to have a healthy respect for that, right? And for sure, just because of how big God is and how holy He is. And you know, when you think of God as a God of judgment, we ought to be a little bit afraid of that.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think that fear is a bad thing, because certainly we all owe a price that we can't afford to pay, and that fear does lead to the women's obedience here. You know, it's a part of that, and you guys have mentioned this, that fear ought to move us to obedience.
Yeah.
And
well, and also it's not even like this is a biblical thing. Like the only time we ever experience this is in the Bible. We constantly, when I'm in a teacher's classroom, speaking of school, even if they're the best teacher, Miss Scott, if I know if I do something wrong, there's going to be a consequence. There's a judgment, and there's a power. So I still have to respect that. So it's not even like this is the only time we experience this. Like our whole lives are like this. When there's an authority figure, we, you know,
and a teacher is a great example, right? Because you know, we're joking around about not being prepared or kind of sliding by in a class or whatever. But I mean, there's a judgment that comes at the end of that class,
right? Yeah,
right. And it's not Mrs. Scott's fault,
right?
If I didn't read the book
right.
and I fail, right? That's not her fault,
right?
She hasn't judged me,
right?
Right? I mean, she's issuing the judgment,
right.
But I brought that on myself.
This is what your work is.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah,
and so when you hear people talk about, well, how can a good God? Well, how can He? You know, what did you do about it? Right. What part did you play in that? Yeah. And so, you know, in today's world, we'll often hear people, sometimes even in the church, say, and look, you know, we could argue, I suppose, about what percentage of the women's obedience was motivated by fear, and what percentage was motivated by joy, right? And man, when we could talk about what percentage of our obedience should be motivated by fear and what percentage should be motivated by joy, and that's something to think about. But like when somebody decides I'm gonna submit to Jesus in baptism and turn my life over to Him, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
If they had just heard a sermon about sin and the consequence of sin and hell, and they said, "Man, I don't want that, and I want Jesus instead," good.
Yeah.
Right? And if they have just heard a sermon or have read the story of Jesus raising from the dead in Matthew chapter 28, and they think, man, I want to experience that resurrection in my life and the joy that it brings, good.
Right.
I don't care. And so a little combination of joy and fear is probably a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as we look at the last question, it says, as we go through the whole sermon, and you know, you had mentioned this too, Lance, that it's one thing to just know, like, do you believe in the resurrection? But we see, you know, the 66% or whatever it was. But then when you look at how is that affecting people's lives, that starts to drop, or living that out in a practical way. And so 8's a really good question. It says, what courageous and decisive step do you need to take to get on mission with Jesus? And I'll be honest, I was ready to just answer the other questions about, you know, what do we know? What can we learn? You know, all this stuff. And so now it gets personal. Like, what steps do I need to take to get on mission? And I'll just go first, because the surface level, like, my initial response is, well, I'm already doing ministry. Like, I already answered the call. Like, what, you know? And so, but as I thought about it deeper, because I knew I needed an answer, I was like, okay, well, what steps do I need to take? Because I feel like I'm already on mission with Jesus. But as I really thought about it, I'm like, man, I've never been comfortable or satisfied with like, well, I'm done. I'm working at a church. I've been here for a while, and so now I'm good. And I'm really thankful for that. That because of the leading of the Holy Spirit, my whole life is trying to draw closer to Jesus. And no matter how good I get at that, at the times I am good at it, if I'm still called, I'm like, well, there's also this. Like the further I get, the more it's like, okay, now that you're here, here's the next step. And so, and I'm really thankful that I'm constantly being called.
Right.
And so right now in my own life, some specific answer, I had a couple, but what steps do I need to take? I put a focus on the disciplines of quiet time and prayer and fasting, of actually, like that's always been a part of my life, but really, really being diligent with all of those. And I recognize some of the distractions I had, so I'm just not doing those things. Like I tried to juggle too many things. So, and this is just for me, but like with Facebook, it's just so easy for me to be on Facebook and whatever. So I allow myself to get on it if I'm at work or looking up something for whatever, but I took it off my phone because when I'm at home, it's just easy to like whatever, like Reels especially. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of that. And it really has kind of like, okay, now I can free myself up. So getting rid of the things that aren't bad, but have been a distraction. The second thing I really feel called to at this stage of my life is developing a deeper community. Having friendships here in the office, having our men's small group has been good, but actually leaning into a few different relationships to like draw closer. And then the last one, this has always sort of been the case, but just raising Graham and Selah. If I'm on mission, then my life is going to help other people be on mission. Sure. And those are my kids are the closest thing. So how, especially now that Graham's in middle school, I remember a lot about middle school, and I remember what my parents did and didn't do and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, oh, he'll remember how I'm living. And so it's not just we got to go to church, but on the times when, if they get upset, then how do I react? And so how am I, and it's not going to be perfect, but like wanting to be intentional with bedtimes and Bible readings and so anyway, those are the sort of the three areas in my own life personally that stood out to me about what can I do at this stage to take the next step and becoming more like Jesus.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I was just thinking, well, we ended on Sunday with this, come and see so you can go and tell. And sometimes we think, oh, I came and saw, and now got to concentrate on the go and tell. I got to get these things right in my life, and I think what you're expressing is know that it's a continuous journey of coming and seeing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, the more even with this, the more I do this, the more the more it draws me to Jesus, and then it changes. Yeah.
No matter how mature you are, or however you want to think about it, right? How spiritual you are, how close you are to God. We have to continue to fill ourselves up, and so those times of quiet time and study and prayer. Fasting, those different ways we, principles and strategies and that we have in place in our life to stay close to Him and to come and see over and over again, right? Come and see. So, I love that.
Oh, I did have one more. Yeah, the go and tell is reaching out to my neighbors. Like as I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, I have these, this where I live. I'm like, I know them, I know their names. And so really being like, I don't know why, but out of everyone, because I already talked to so many students anyway, but like outside of Wallula, I was really hit with like, that's, I think one of the things that I want to lean more into. Yeah. So anyway, all right, I'm done talking.
Stuff.
No, I'm right there with you on so much of what you said. And like Facebook, social media, I'm in the same boat. Like the whole time you're talking, I'm like, yes. Like I recently have been fasting from it, and more like giving myself like small windows, like you said, where like I need to get on there for like certain reasons. And I've been cutting that out. And I read that book by John Mark Comer, Practicing the Way, and he over and over talked about taking things out, making room for Jesus to come in. And so I've been convicted about that. But yeah, like you said, it's so easy, especially like as the evening is winding down and we're getting ready to do bedtime with 3 kids. I find myself like trying to like scroll more and like I don't just distract myself from this like task I have to do. And then then when they're in bed, it's like, oh yeah, I got this phone now. So same thing, just like taking that out of being right in front of me all the time. And it has caused my mind to be on Jesus more, to dwell on him more. And so I'm kind of in a similar season of like figuring out like what in my schedule do I need to take away or adjust in order to make myself more available to be with Jesus. And then as far as like kind of this thought of like going and telling and putting an action to the come and see, I thought of a song. There's Chris Renzema. We sing one of his songs on Sundays sometimes, and he wrote this song. I think it was inspired by like a poem from one of the saints. I don't know, but it's called "Christ Has No Body But Yours," and it's kind of like a weird concept. So each verse, like I just jotted down some of them. So he sings like "Christ has no hands but yours," and then he talks about working to the point of like aching hands. Christ has no feet but yours, so like moving forward in your spiritual journey, that sort of thing. And then Christ has no mouth but yours. So it's kind of a weird concept, but like speaking up the truth, speaking into people's lives and situations. And so the main point is like I thought of that song because it is like looking at different relationships or communities you're in, and like what can you do in order to be a light to them, reflect the love of Jesus, because we talk about the come and see, so we're experiencing the gospel, the love of Jesus, resurrection, and then now it's your chance to relay that message onto someone else. And so what is your method of doing that? I don't know, is it serving or generosity or
and it's hard to do that because if you're trying to balance everything, like I don't read my Bible that much, I don't pray that much, but I know I need to go do this. And you kind of can just go and tell, but it's hard to do that when you're just being told to, versus if you've already come and see. If you've been connected with Jesus, then it becomes easier and so I look at the times in my life when I was like, man, why does it seem so hard? And it's like, oh, well, I wasn't really plugged in that much. You know, I was busy, but one leads to the other, and so and so the more you do one, then the more the Holy Spirit starts to reveal to you, here's the areas. And so if you're only doing one, then there's a problem there. And so, and if you're trying to do both and it's not working, it's probably because
God's really big. He can do what he wants, right? And you can look in Scripture and see examples of when he used bad people to do good things. But as if you're a follower of Jesus, you don't want to be that example.
No,
right?
Well, and also like a lifetime of it is not sustainable.
Yes. And all I'm saying is that he's probably not going to use you in a way that you're not prepared to be used. Probably. You know, he can do what he wants, and there are miraculous ways that he might use somebody in some instance, but he's probably not going to use you in a way you're not prepared. And I just think, this Easter we've been talking about these invitations, these personal invitations, right? And I said, I've just said over and over, just take them and pray for a chance to share them with somebody. And I bet you'll find that chance. And I truly believe that. There's this real connection between coming and seeing and going and telling.
Right.
And when we are staying close to Jesus, then he is going to provide us with opportunities, I think, to be his hands and feet. And that song you mentioned, I thought a couple things that. The first one is, I'm glad you didn't sing it on Easter, right?
Get a little scratch in their head.
Yeah, he has a body, but the point of the song is true, right? Yeah, I mean, you've heard somebody tell you before, you might be the only Jesus somebody ever sees, right? And that's the point of the song, right? We want to reflect Jesus, and the church is the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, and so we want to be that. So I appreciate that, and we for sure want to do that. I listed these 6 questions that we go over in our Explore Wallula class, and that it can help you to live like Jesus really raised from the dead, and because these are just 6 things that we want believers, that Jesus wants his followers to do. We talk about the fact that Jesus wants his followers to know some things. He wants his followers to be like him, and so to reflect his attitude and the fruit of the Spirit. That's who he wants us to be. And then there's some things that he wants us to do. And if we really believe Jesus raised from the dead, then we would do these things. It's like that story, what 18-year-old girl who rescued the baby, what any sane person would do. Right? And so, these 6 questions. Have you stopped and talked with God today? So he wants us to be in conversation and prayer with him. Have you stopped and talked to him today? Are your current choices and priorities consistent with Scripture? Have you been in God's Word to know that, okay, my life is reflecting this life? Are service, sharing, and giving of yourself to God hallmarks of your life? So are we living a life of worship, right? So worship needs to be a part of our life. Am I demonstrating love to God, others, and others through the use of my time, talents, and resources? Am I serving God and others, right? Have I connected with other believers in worship, study, and fellowship this week? Am I living in that biblical community? You guys have mentioned this in small groups and just in relationship with other believers. Am I hanging out, doing life with them? And then finally, have I invested in the life of someone so that I can invite them to church and ultimately invite them to know Jesus? Am I sharing his story with others? And evangelism or outreach, or however you want to phrase that. So we need to be about these 6 things in our life. And if Jesus really raised from the dead, wouldn't we prioritize these things? And I loved your communion meditation, Zach. You talked about one of the things we know is true about the resurrection is that it changed the disciples' lives. They were different people from before the resurrection, and I just thought, Thomas, I'd never heard that before. Changed him from a doubter to a shouter, right?
That was not my.
I forgot. I was going to ask you if you came up with that.
I'll give you
of course
credit
not.
for that.
I do research.
You do research.
I
made sure
you could have came up with it.
I could have come up with it. I did not. I saw it.
Oh.
I thought it was a good quote.
Yeah, where'd you find it?
Mark Moore.
Oh, Mark Moore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I like it.
We're peering behind the curtain right now.
Yeah.
When he had used those things, I was like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's why I used those things.
Yeah.
But it's still true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those guys' lives are changed, and it ought to change our lives too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What is it?
Our lives ought to be
I
different.
wonder what we could, if Mark Moore wrote about our lives, what would they say?
Right.
What was I before and after?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've said this before, but this is true. Like, and sharing your story with others, and how do we share Jesus? How do we communicate the gospel with others? Well, what's the most powerful story we have to share? It's our story. Right? And so a simple way to think about this is just that before and after picture. What was your life before Jesus?
Right.
And what is it after Jesus? And if you can't come up with, right, this is the hard
Basically
thing.
the same.
Right.
I go to church on Sundays now.
Yeah.
if you're before and after, if you can't come up with a change, and I'm not saying that before you needed to be a drug addicted, murdering prostitute, right? That's not the deal. But that wasn't any of his disciples, really, right? I mean, the 12. So what is your life after this?
Right.
And if you can't come up with a difference, then you need to think about, all these things we've been talking about. You need to think about probably where you're going to see, how you're spending time with them.
Yeah.
Come and see, so that you can go and tell.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways we could do it, like you said, with those 5, and even some of the ones you mentioned in church. talking about with small groups and stuff.
Right.
And so all of those things you mentioned here at Wallula, there's places to get plugged in, places to help point. You're not on your own trying to figure
Right.
this out. We can help
Right.
with whatever one of those. When I think of that list, it's like, which one convicts me? You know,
Yeah.
like, because you're usually trying to do multiple things, and
Yeah.
and so as each one kind of convicts you where you're at, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, there's an easy track to follow, right? That's why, here at Wallula, we talk about, hey, be a part of a worship service, be a part of a small group, be a part of a ministry team. And it's not that those three things are the perfect avenue, or it's not like if you check these three boxes, then everything's going to be good
Right.
in your spiritual life or whatever, in your relationship with Jesus. But they will keep you on track. They will help to do that. So if you're thinking about those 6 questions and you're wondering, how can I do that? Well, it boils down to starting here, starting first with coming and seeing Jesus. If you've never said yes to Jesus for the first time in baptism, that's where you start, right? Come and say yes to Jesus and submit to him in baptism and receive the gift of the Holy Spirit and let him make you new from the inside out. And so begin with Jesus. Always begin with Jesus, right? But come and say yes to him, and then continue in worship and be a part of just lifting high together with other believers the name of Jesus, proclaiming him over and over, and be a part of a small group and build relationships with other believers wherever and however you're doing that, and then serve him, and serve others. And so those 3 venues will help you do that. Yeah.
Well, it was great. We're like I said, if you were with us for the first time or hearing this for the first time, we're glad that you're joining with us. We do this every week, and so we will be starting back up again with the Book of Acts, and we'll be there for a while. And so excited to see now what happens after Jesus and as the church is growing. So so we'll see you guys next week.
All right.